Kian Pane Bato, we are Tomoni, oh, yeah, do Monsieur Fia. I'm on my Yoko, so we get son, then Bemo. Kian Pane Bato, we are Tomoni, oh, yeah, do Monsieur Fia. Kian, c'est pas yon do, c'est pas yon do, Kian, c'est pas yon do, Siakpayan diju so si yo lele oh si yo lele oh ya si yo lele oh ya si yo lele yo amon manyo ko so wi ya son dan bemu Kian Pane Bato wi atomo ni o abinyon mi do mon si awie ya o Kian se payan diju mama Kian se payan diju re son ke wo kian ya Kian se payan diju Kian ya uri money mo re tole se ma bembe son bi Kian ya uri manjo e abatoni ti pension même o Kian ya uri money
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of Tough Talking Thursday. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In today's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be discussing a very important subject: competence. Competence in the public sector. A lot of time we hear, this person is incompetent. This person is incompetent. He's not competent. What is competence, and why is it important when we come to public service? Do we have some stories? How do we detect or determine who's competent, and how is it important, especially when it comes to elected officers, appointments, those who work in civil service? Is competence that important? Or when it comes to government, is the will and pleasure of the president? Does competence really matter? With me to discuss this, I have Dr. Abdoulaye Dukle. Dr. Duke, welcome to Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you, Dennis, and hello to Nagbe and Cole. Pleased to be here.
And I also learned today is the end of Ramadan.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you did it.
We did it.
Thank you. Let me welcome, joining us for the first time on Tough Talking Thursday, Mr. Victor Nambwe, J. Victor Nambwe. Victor, welcome to Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you, Dennis. It's good to be here.
On Tough Talking Thursday, as the name suggests, we talk tough and there is no room for Tabata. Let me also welcome FOL Public Policy Analyst and presenter on the History Channel, Carl Family. Carl, welcome to Tough Talking Thursday.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Dennis. Hello, gentlemen.
How are you?
Hello.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe on Tough Talking Thursday. On Tough Talking Thursday, really it can be tough, and please brace yourself to talk tough. A lot of things been happening. So before we start the show, I saw a video that I don't know if you saw it. Let me play it quickly, and then we can begin our show.
This is Honor Yakia Koruba setting. Honor Yakia Wa Koruba setting at Koruba road here. Setting for church. Over there, right?
That's Representative Yaka Koruba, who was, according to the story, who was helping a little girl selling a plantain chip. Victor, you are smiling. What do you make of the video? Election time around.
Yes, it is interesting. I think we're all familiar with Honorable Yeke Koruba and his antics. But I think all of these are intended to grab attention. I think he's looking for an opportunity to call attention to, I think, what he sees, which I think many of us will also agree with, as just the general neglect of our leaders to perform the task for which they were either elected or appointed. So I think Honorable Koluba is trying to. He's looking for a stage, a bigger stage to, I think, to spread a message. That's how I view that video.
Thank you, Dr. Duke. How you see it?
I think, I go along with Nagbe. I think you don't look at, Yeke Koliba to go say, I'm introducing a bill on this, on that. But, to raise issues in the street, to get people attention, he knows how to do it. He got a platform. People listen to him. Either you agree with him or not, he will get his point across. And he's a politician. He's like, I think he's using a political space very well for himself.
Carl, which one do you think Honorable Koluba is getting across here?
I mean, I see Liberia as being unique compared to other countries. Our lawmakers, our leaders come from the bottom. They come from, most of them, almost all of them, come from a history where they may have been actually peddling plantain chips in the streets. So I don't even see this as theatrics. I see this as Yake showing people that I came from here, this is where I've come, and this is who I still am. They talk about him being a child soldier. What was he doing before that? Probably hawking in the streets. So for me, it was just a reminder. It would have been a thing of theatrics if a Nigerian lawmaker did that, because we all know where they come from. You don't see poor people, reaching that level in Nigeria or Ghana. That's something we do in Liberia. So, it's just a reflection of who our leaders are, and I don't think it's a bad thing. And I really don't think he's showboating. I think that's sincerely who that man is.
Thank you. And I've seen Honorable Representative, now Senator Snow, doing the same thing. Sometimes he's carrying bags of rice. I've seen, and I sometimes confuse the two, Thomas Fala and Sir Joseph. Sometimes I confuse the two names. I've seen them, among people doing that.
That's what they know. That's what they know. They don't know how to write laws, but they know how to do that.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to get into our topic for the day, which is competence in public service and why it is important. Let me start with you, Carl. We talk about competence. There's a lot of these words we throw around here. Competence, incompetence, qualification, eligibility. What is competence? And why is it important when it comes to public service?
Competence is the ability to execute your duties and responsibilities effectively. That's basically what it is. It's not, sometimes people meet basic criteria, basic qualifications, but they're not competent to execute because it involves experience, knowledge, and other intangible things that, you usually can measure only through evaluation of past performance. So competence is absolutely necessary. If you're not a competent driver, you could cause a lot of trouble. You could harm people. You could cost human life. If you're not a competent security guard, you could cause loss of property. So there's a lot of, competence is something that no matter what level you're performing, what job duties you have, you must be able to execute those duties effectively. And that basically, that effective execution of duty is what measures competence.
Thank you. Victor, there's always a basic requirement or eligibility criteria for certain job or certain function, right? For instance, so you are 18 years old, so you can do this, or you've been in the country, you can do this. How is that different from competence?
Well, I agree with Ms. Fambule. Competence really is that ability to do a task, perform a task successfully and efficiently. And so, qualification, I think, would be the wheel that gets you to the job. And so it affords you um, the opportunity to be given a task. But that alone is not sufficient um, to consider you competent. You must execute the job successfully and efficiently. And I think efficiency, especially in Liberia, where the resources are very limited. And efficiency is basically maximizing production in the shortest possible time. You're giving a piece of task. If you're asked to perform within a certain period, you must execute that task productively and quickly. So I think in that case, then qualification differs from competence. You could very well be qualified for a job and not be competent enough to execute.
Dr. Duke, how can we tell if somebody is competent who's doing a piece of job, especially like in public service?
Well, I think the competence of the person on the job would tell you quickly if that person is qualified for the job or not. It doesn't take a lot of measurement to know if, I don't know, a city mayor or a minister or a director of some state institution is capable of running that institution properly. That's, I think it's very visible. I mean, it doesn't have, you don't have to go deep to see it. You just look at a person's performance over the years. After 6 months, you should know if a person is capable or not to run an institution, whatever that is. If they can't, then you know they're not competent. They may be qualified, as Mr. Nagwe said. They might have all the qualifications, the diploma, the training, but they may not be capable of running that institution. They may not have the competence. Competence could be intuition. It could be how you get along with people. It could be how, your vision, how you execute a vision. It could be many things. But qualifications are things that you learn.
And how do you know that, Dr. Duke, before you bring someone in the office? And again, we are focusing on public service in Liberia. How can we tell that the person we are hiring or the person we are electing or the person who we want to perform this task is competent?
Well, if you take someone who has never really run anything ever, they don't have any degree, they didn't go to any formal educational process to a certain level, they have not acquired any experience in a certain formal or informal sector, and you take that person, you give them a job to run a big enterprise, state enterprise, or a city for that matter, then you're making a mistake. I think that those are things that we know. You see them happening every day. When you pick somebody who dropped out from school, never got a job, never run anything in his life or her life, and then you give them the capital city and tell them to run it as they want to. You set them for failure. So that's how you can tell.
Thank you. And Carl, let me go back to you as to why competence is needed. Should anybody care about competence in public service? So the reason I ask that is people are elected to public office where they run campaign and they win. And the criteria there is you meet the basic criteria, you are able to convince people to vote for you, and you get the job. So, and then you have others that are appointed based on the will and pleasure of somebody else. So is competence really important or a factor when it comes to public service?
I mean, I think the answer to this is obvious. Competence is important everywhere. If you're not competent, things are not going to be done correctly. That's the whole point of competence. It's the ability to execute things, as Mr. Nambe has said and Mr. Ducle has said. But you also have to be able to um, perform as the legislative or regulatory mandate requires that you perform. So one of the things that I have noticed is that people will say, well, we need to, change the laws, or we need to change the Constitution. We need to change the instruments of the laws and the Constitution. Those instruments are the people that are there to execute the tasks that the law draws out. And if people are not able to do that, there's going to be an issue. If you send me to perform surgery on someone just because you like me, you say, you know what, Paul, you are now a neurosurgeon because I like you. Go perform neurosurgery. It's going to be an impossible task for me because I would not be competent at neurosurgery. And this is the exact same principle applies to governance, to all aspects of governance, whether you be an inspector at a checkpoint, a motor vehicle inspector at a checkpoint, or whether you be the head of an entity who's charged with managing not only employees, but making sure policies are being executed correctly. If you're not able to do those things, if you don't even understand those basic things, you can't do the things correctly. When you have incompetence in government, government doesn't function, it doesn't serve its purpose, and things collapse. In fact, incompetence in government is the most dangerous because the cost of bad governance is human life. The ultimate price we pay for bad governance is, the ultimate consequence, I should say, for bad governance is death. People die because governments make life and death decisions. And unfortunately, we think, a lot of Liberians believe, that the government can be incompetent and the private sector will run everything, or NGOs will run everything. And so they don't prioritize this. But the reason things aren't being done correctly is because of incompetence.
Thank you. Mr. Namwe raised an important point about the Constitution, right? So let me read for you Article 28. Any person at least one, oh no, not that one, is the requirement for a, all right, for a Senate, citizens of Liberia who meet the following qualifications are eligible to become members of the legislature. For the Senate, have attained the age of 30, that's Article 30, and for the House of Representatives, have attained the age of 25. Be domiciled in the country or constituency to be represented not less than 1 year prior to the time of the elections, and be a taxpayer. End of story. Right? So someone we are electing to make, as Carl said, that life and death decision, that's the requirement. So what is the litmus test for competence? And where is it coming from?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I'm surprised that making laws is not even in there. But yes,
it'll become their function. But in order to be that person, these are the requirements you should meet.
Right. And yes, I mean I agree with Dr. Dugle and Ms. Fambule. Competence does not have to be competence versus experience. I see my friend Navarro's Momo is already indicating that. I think we can marry the two. So yes, the qualification, the age requirement and all of that should be sufficient to qualify you to seek public office. But now when you get in there, what is it that you're delivering to the people? I mean, that's the reason why they will elect you the second time or so. I mean, if you read the reports, I think our legislators they have a very difficult time being re-elected simply because I think the people figure them out within the first or second year that they are not delivering what they promised. And so, yes, I think our people should hold our public servants' feet to the fire to insist that they perform, whether elected or appointed.
And Mr. Nawa, just to add to that, Article 34 also talk about the powers of the legislature, right?
Right.
The legislature shall have the power to create new counties and other political subdivision to provide for the security of the republic, the armed forces, to make appropriations, to levy taxes, duties, imports. So if you look at their function and you look at the qualification, how do we marry them so that we can build up some list of competencies that they must qualify or they must meet?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, Dr. Dukley was saying, competence, it is difficult to judge our incoming legislators, because most of them don't have any track record of performance. Because really, competence is a mix of the qualifications by training and then the track record of experience, your performance. And so it is a little difficult because most of our even though not all of them, but most of our young legislators don't have the track record of performance. And so they come in the office, and I think the people watch them for maybe a year or two and see what they're able to do. But yes, the ability to deliver, the Congress, even in this country, in the US, they have what they call the power of the purse. They appropriate, they levy taxes and all of that. And so they really influence policy, because the executive really cannot do much spending without the approval of the Congress.
Right.
So they do play a very major role in making sure that the interests of the people they serve are also served. And they have the ability to withhold funding, especially, every they always say, it's always good to hit them where it hurts, and it's almost always the purse. When you hold the purse string tight, it hurts. And so the executive would definitely they will listen to the legislator if they are constraining the executive from meeting their budgetary allocation because they're not providing funding. So, in short, yes, when a legislator come in, they're coming in to serve a constituency. They have a responsibility to make sure that this constituency feels the benefits from the government. And what do we mean? Schools, roads, markets, safe drinking water, sanitation. All of these people are looking up to their legislator to deliver on their behalf. And sadly, not many of our legislators today can be said to be doing that.
Thank you. Dr. Duke. Same question on the because normally what we hear the first side of the minimum requirements you should meet, but also if I'm looking for a job, I also look at the job function, because I have to meet that as well. How do you combine the two so that we can evaluate people if we want to measure their competence before hiring them? Because what they are supposed to do should tell you what qualification they're supposed to have.
Yeah, but I think Mr. Nabe just spoke about the legislature. And if you're talking about service, I mean, you're talking about public service, that's one thing. But if you're talking about technical field, where you're talking about hiring a teacher or a doctor or somebody to build a road, I mean, those are qualifications that you have on paper, and then you go back on it. But if you're going to elect someone, what happens if someone from down somewhere in Lofa only spoke Mende and started running for representative and people want to elect him? What do we do? And if he gets elected, he just needed a translator to work with him so what do we do? So that's a question of competence when you talk about public service. What do they represent? What is that person coming to represent? Isn't that real democracy when you have somebody from deep down low farm speaking only Mende, running his campaign or her campaign and getting elected, and then coming to Monrovia and say, okay, are we going to do the laws differently? So we have to think about those, when you talk about public service, yes. the problem, you cannot define competence. You cannot define competence before the time. You just have to look at a person's track record, as we always say, and say, okay, what have you done? What is your story? Your story will tell us if you're capable of handling some things. That's for being hired as port manager or city mayor or whatever. But if you want to hire somebody to run a hospital or to run a university, that's a different kind of competence you're asking for. That competence has to be based on qualification that the person has drawn from experience.
And if I may chime in real quickly before my sister comes in, and this is why the wise framers of our Constitution insist that in order to serve as a representative, you must be domiciled. You must rest. You must reside in the area, because that is how you will understand what the people need in that area. This is why, for instance, a crewman who may be living, or a grabberman living in Barobo, may not be suitable to represent a Loma man who lives in Lofa, because you don't understand, what the needs of those people in that locale are. So you're coming in then based on your understanding of what the people need in that area. You then represent them and advocate for them to bring relief. That's how you become competent, based on what you're delivering in terms of addressing the needs of those people.
Call.
Yes. The Constitution not only spells out minimum criteria, it also lists out the terms of reference for these jobs, these high-level jobs. The terms of reference is a constitutional mandate, just like the age limit. So if the Constitution is saying that these people are responsible, they even take an oath of office saying that they're going to execute their duties. They know if they're not able to execute those duties, if they don't understand those duties. There's a lot of things that are wrong in Liberia because of the incompetence of the leadership. Let's be specific with the lawmakers. The Constitution clearly spells out that representation should be representation should be proportionate to the population. Incompetent people interpret that to mean representation should be proportionate to land. And so they think they represent land and not human beings. Therefore, you have disproportionate representation in Liberia, which is completely unconstitutional, because the people who are making decisions do not understand the Constitution. And they're not even wise enough to have people who do understand interpret it for them. Right now, Liberia is operating outside of the Constitution. Everything that they're doing in the legislature, in any other country where the citizens themselves would be competent, they would recognize that every law that the legislature has passed has been unconstitutional, because there is disproportionate representation. If you're representative from Monserrato County, you represent far more people than a representative from Grand Cru County. This is unconstitutional. Therefore, everything that they do until they correct this is unconstitutional. No one addresses it. The Supreme Court doesn't address this. Nobody brings this up anymore. It was brought up the first time they did the redistricting. They're doing it again. Nobody's questioning it. Part of the problem is that they don't care. And the bigger problem here is the competence or lack thereof of the citizens themselves. Citizens are citizens either by birth or naturalization. That is what the Constitution says. But citizens also have responsibilities. Their number one duty is to support and defend the Constitution. When that does not happen, the citizens have failed. Everything else falls apart. Citizens must stay informed on issues affecting their communities. They also have responsibilities. Citizens are not pawns in a democracy. They are the actors in the democracy. They're the decision makers. They're the ones that decide who's going to lead. So at the end of the day, those who are doing the hiring must be competent enough to hire. They must understand what they're hiring for. And when they don't know what they're hiring for, when they lack the competence, when they do not understand the Constitution, they will hire a plumber to go perform surgery. And that's what's happening. So we're in a really, really, overly, almost buffoonish situation. The example that we have set for Liberia, for the country at large, for for the world, is a bad example of how the citizens, not understanding their own laws and their own constitutions, can make decisions to empower people who themselves don't understand the Constitution. So this is where we sit today. We have disproportionate representation. We have lawmakers trying to execute the duties of the executive branch of government, talking about they have operational funds. They're running around using public money to build bridges instead of them holding the executive to book to execute their duties, which are more operational. You've got lawmakers doing things because they don't understand their function. And they don't have to understand their functions because the citizens don't understand their functions, so they're not making them function correctly. Until the citizens themselves understand what they're hiring these people to do, we're going to still have these problems repeatedly.
Thank you.
I've said this though, and to Ms. Famula's point, I had indicated earlier that the return rate of our legislators is very minuscule, very, very small. And our electorate may not know exactly what it requires to represent them, but I think they do know when you're not delivering. And this is why most of them are not re-elected. And so, yes, our people may not know the Constitution to the letter, but they know what it means to represent them. And if you are not, they will let you know come the next election cycle. You will not be re-elected. I think that is their evaluation of your performance, of your competence to represent.
I disagree with that, Mr. Namba, respectfully, but I don't believe that having a misunderstanding of what your representatives' duties are, holding them up to standards that are not constitutional, like whether or not they're paying you school fees or buying you rice, I don't think that's an understanding of what their job duties are. That's something that they think, but it's incorrect. That's not their job. Their job is to make sure you have an economy where you don't have to beg someone to pay your school fees or beg someone to give you rice. And so because they don't understand that or haven't accepted that the real responsibility here is to grow the economy through creating proper policies and creating an environment where business, private sector can thrive so that you can afford to send your children to school, they think the job of the legislature is to be Santa Claus. And then if you're not Santa Claus, they won't re-elect you. So even if you do your job and you try to push policies that will affect them correctly, they say, oh, but that man mean you're not giving us rice. So that is not necessarily an understanding of the responsibilities. It's a misunderstanding of the responsibilities.
I'm not really disagreeing with you, Ms. Family. I am not disagreeing with you. I know pandering is part of what our people use. But again, I'm saying to you, if it were working, most of these people will be re-elected. But even though they're in office and they're getting the $30,000, whatever it is, and yes, they're distributing bags of rice during election, all of that, most of them still end up not being re-elected. The people know it. They will take the rice and walk away, but they will make sure not to vote for you tomorrow because I think they understand innately that there are some basic things that you're supposed to deliver, helping them get into school, education for the community, safe drinking water for the. I think they understand those things. That's what I was saying.
Okay.
And let me go to Dr. Dukia. Should the voters and that's the should the voters care, or how can we get them to the point to care about competence in those they elected?
I think are you done with the question? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's this question about what is the state that the people are running. Do they know? Do they have ownership of the states? Do they understand the function of a representative or a senator? And people who are running, do they understand that, oh no, you don't have to make a bridge. All you have to do, make sure that government invests in our corner. You don't have to come and cut grass with me because, that's not your job. Your job is to make sure you pass laws. But do people really understand that aspect? That, going to the House of Representative doesn't mean the president is going to pay your school fee, clean your yard, take your wife or your husband to the hospital, and all of that. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be a citizen and have responsibility and take ownership of the state machinery. And if you don't have that understanding, clear understanding, we keep going into set. People would think that they should be elected because they pave 1 mile of road someplace, or they should be senator because they set up a small clinic somewhere where nobody goes, and that is the problem. So this question, the fundamental issue is: do we understand the kind of state we want to run? Who is running it? Do we run it top down or up, down up? People are really part of the democratic process. Maybe they are not.
Right.
People are not part of the democratic process. All they know is, what are you going to bring me? You're going to bring me a bag of rice. You're going to send my daughter to school or my son to school or whatever it is, and they don't understand it. So we have inherited a state that we never really question. We never fundamentally say, let's reformat this state to belong to Liberians. We're still running it from Monrovia to the small village. It doesn't matter. If nobody understands the Constitution, it doesn't make any difference. That's why my question: what happened to the mandate man who doesn't speak English and get elected? How do you deal with somebody like that? We have chiefs. Chiefs don't understand the Constitution. What is their role? They serve as what? Instead of representing the voice of the people to the government, they play cheerleaders to the government because they've been reduced to cheerleaders job. They don't have a voice. They cannot translate any bill or any amendment, any constitutional issue to the people. No. All they know, they go to Moravia, they get some money, they come back, and the people dance around them. But this is part of democracy that we are forgetting to use. So all of these things are problematic. So you can't talk about competence really when you don't really know what are you looking for, what are you trying to run.
And if I may quickly chime in again, what Dr. Duke is saying, and as an education, I like the numbers speak for me, the facts. And they always say the government's priorities are represented in the budget. The places they prioritize get the most money. In the 2023 budget, salaries, government salaries, 37% of the budget. Salaries. Put that against 12% for education. Now, I know this because here I work with the Maryland County Association and the Barobo Association, so I'm a little bit involved with the education project. There are people, teachers with certificate, who make $140 a month, $200 at most, teachers. And you have a legislator making $15,000 a month. I mean, just look at the numbers and you tell me. You think these legislators really are going to hold the executive's feet to the fire? I heard President Weah is asking for $200,000 for transportation to go someplace. How is the legislature? How are they going to speak up if they themselves they are a part of the problem? So I think our people know it, and so yes, you come to them the first time with your fiamomo or whatever they call it. You get elected, but then over your time in the House, they will assess you, and you will know it by your re-election. I believe that's the ultimate evaluation of your performance, of your competence on the job.
Yeah.
And Carl, where should we, when it comes to where should this line be drawn to test competence, or where should the issue of competence and incompetence be addressed? Is it in presidential appointments, for instance? Is it at the confirmation, or both? Or is it with the citizens themselves not being competent to no competence? No puns
competence
intended.
should be addressed at every aspect of everything you're doing. If you're hiring someone to paint your house, you need to know that they know how to paint a house. So no matter what level it is, I mean, the legislature is now, I mean, the Senate is supposed to now come in, and if the executive has failed to assess the person's ability to do the job that they have nominated them for, the Senate shouldn't confirm them. The Senate's responsibility, I've been through confirmation twice. They ask you for your credentials, they ask you for your resume, you have to bring your degree, you have to bring references, you have to package everything, and you have to give one to each senator. Even if the senator is not on the committee that's going to, I will use the word question or maybe interrogate you. Every sitting senator has to receive a copy of your background, everything. And senators that are not even responsible to go to your confirmation hearing could raise a question. You might be a senator that won't even meet you. They might say, wait a minute, this person's doing, public policy. How does that relate to transportation? And they might not even be on the transportation committee. They won't be at your confirmation hearing, and they can communicate with the transportation committee and say, I see a red flag here. How does public policy relate? They're going to raise that question in confirmation hearing. Ms. Fambula, you did public policy. How does that relate to transportation? And then it is the nominee's duty to convince the Senate that they're competent at their jobs. Then the response is, well, public transportation is a matter of public policy, sirs and madams, and this is why. And you have to give an explanation to the Senate that makes sense to them. They say, okay, well, she answered that question competently. Next question. This is what they're supposed to do. And so it doesn't stop at verifying your credentials, because you could go to school and graduate and not have retained anything. Some people are good at taking tests, but they can't turn that into practical anything. And coming right out of school doesn't make you competent. It just makes you qualified. What's your past experience and how does that relate to this responsibility? What are you bringing to the table? These are questions people should ask people when they're running for office, when they're making decisions about who they're going to elect, when a president is looking among people to select for nomination for important heads of ministries and institutions. That president needs to be asking the same question. Okay, this guy was washing small aircraft. How does that relate to managing our international airport? And before that president even nominates him, either the president himself or some of his staff should be questioning this young man. How does this relate? Have you ever supervised anyone before? Oh, I work a supervised night shift at Walmart. How does that translate to running an international airport? What do you know about TSA? What do you know about air traffic control? What experience do you have in this area? Before you make the decision to nominate. Then when you nominate the person, the Senate then needs to go through the same process. So it's not enough to just like somebody. Surely you like somebody who's also competent, Mr. Weah and everybody else that makes decisions. You can't just only be people you like are the people that don't really have experience. So the president has to like you and trust you, but the president also has to be able to trust you to execute your duties. And whenever the president overlooks your responsibilities and duties and sends you to do a job that you're not capable of doing, because competence means capability, and you get there, the gatekeepers are the senators that the people elect. And these senators now have to work for the people and say, I'm not going to send someone to the airport that doesn't know what he's doing. Our constituents didn't elect us to do that. We're not going to send someone to the Ministry of Finance who, when they lived in the United States, had bad credit, didn't pay their bills, filed bankruptcy 6 months ago. Those are the kinds of things that people need to be thinking about.
And I will press the
Dr.
point.
Bill?
I will press the point further. Sorry, Doug, I hope I'm not stepping you. But I will press the point further that, confirmation of a nominee should not be the forever pass, to then just go and do whatever you please. I mean, this is why the legislators have their chairpersons of various agencies. Chairperson on transportation or education. I don't remember any time we've ever had any hearings in the legislature, in spite of the fact that all of these reports are coming out. The airport that Ms. Family just mentioned, the place is a mess. We all fly in and out. I mean, we all know what it is to be landing over there at night. Does the president care? Does the legislature care? When did they ever call people in for hearing? I mean, they have the right to do that. They have the right to demand that, because the president apparently will not reshuffle, he will barely fire anybody. But the legislature can also make him to know that this person, in spite of the fact that the general populace is already saying that. So they also have that responsibility, not just to confirm the president and leave them alone. This is why they're chairing various committees, so that they can continue to interact with these people and call them on the floor and question them.
Right. Dr. Drew, does this real competence thing, does it really work when it comes to running government? Because you see, there's something in our system called the will and pleasure of the president, right? There's this party system. Right now, if you look at our political system, people are in various parties. And when you get to power, it's time to get your guys to, as in the words of the current vice president, our time to eat, right? So how does this really work? I mean, in the private sector, I mean, you got to go through this level of interview and scrutiny and test taking before you get a job, right? But when it comes to government, that's interest, that's the likability factor, the popularity, those you trust, those who get your back, and all that thing, everything playing together. How do we put competence in there?
I think, well, it would depend on the leader. If you have a leader who is thinking about service, national service, not just being praised and danced around, and you have a leader who cares about issues that matter to the nation. That's one thing. That leader will appoint competent people, not just qualified, but competent people. Say, you know what, you can do this. Then again, it comes back to also the ownership of the state. How do you get people to tell the government, this person is not performing, or this person has been inducted by the LHCC? Why is he or she still doing in the government, sitting in the cabinet? So if you don't know that, and then you come back to this matter of ownership of the state. If you don't own it, you don't think it belongs to you, that you can change it, that you can mold the state. As a citizen, you don't do anything because you say their thing, the people think. So you sit down and watch everything get, bundled up, and then you wait for your little bag of rice and your little packet change and go your way. But if the people know that this minister who is passing in a flashy car has been indicted and therefore should not be running government issues, they can stop that person from going to work. They can push the legislature to raise the issue and get that person out of the office. But if they don't do it, and then you have at the top somebody who doesn't care about quality, and then you have the whole nation stranded in what you call a culture of mediocrity. To be mediocre is okay because there's no competence. You qualify, you not qualify, it doesn't matter. It's being liked that matter. So that culture comes from the top and comes from the bottom. The bottom doesn't know how to run a state. They don't know if they really. We have never had that chance, I think. When we had that transformation in 1980 to now, we've been going from survival to survival. We never had a chance to sit down and say, how do we want to transform the Liberian citizenship? How do Liberians participate in the process from the bottom up? We never had that discussion. We just pretended that you can go back to the old days and merry-go-round. So accountability, lack of accountability, nobody's accountable, nobody's taking the responsibility, and nobody question no one because everybody is mediocre, so it works.
Thank you. Mr. Nawe, there's a lot of incompetence being thrown around, especially at people in the current government. So when I was preparing for this topic, I got a pushback that, oh, when you mention competence, you just want to bash the weird government. That's all you're going to do, right? So this whole idea of competence, are you taking it a step back, say, well, or is so this guy told me incompetence did not start with weird. So why are you guys making it a weird thing? How do you look at the question of the issue of incompetence or competence in public service throughout the ages? Is it important now than then? Well, did we have more competent people in government than now, or vice versa? The history of incompetence and competence in government.
Well, no, honestly, I don't believe that the question of competence in government is only a President Weah problem. I mean, we've had this problem with us for a very long time. We're highlighting it now because President Weah is in the mansion, and of course, he himself has brought in his own brand of incompetence. But yes, we've seen this throughout the ages. Now, the problem with this president, I mean, I have been around for quite a little while, probably longer than some of you have been. I've seen a lot of incompetence in government. The most recent being the Samuel Doe time. I mean, we all know what happened if you were not from Tucson or from Granger. It was very difficult to serve your government. We all know that. I'm from the southeast, but we all know that. But this president, he's tone deaf, it appears. I mean, all the outcry against Lisgis, and my friend Lawrence George, we all went to high school together. I know Lawrence very well. But if you're not doing a job efficiently and people are telling you you're not doing it right, there's nothing wrong with, course correcting and making a change to do a better job. So when the public is talking about it and the outcry is becoming enormous, you should do something about it. And the president has shown no willingness to do that. And I think this is why we are highlighting. The president seems to be concerned more with evaluating the public in his church. He goes and preaches about people who criticize government, but he doesn't talk about what's happening in his government. That's one. Now, on the opposition side, there is also gross incompetence. I mean, look at the opposition community. What is it that they're really doing besides trying to be president? What exactly is the opposition really doing? The opposition is like a shadow government. They are supposed to call the government out on every move. It can't be, I said something yesterday, and so today, I'm taking a rest. The opposition cannot even hold together. You understand me? The leading candidates right now, they can't sit down in the same room together. I mean, we all know who they are. The former Vice President, Mr. Cummings, and what kind of opposition is it? So it is a problem, but it didn't start with the Weah government, but he's accentuating it to a higher degree. That's what I was saying.
Let me put I have Carl and Dr. Duke who work in the previous government, so I want to put you on the spot. Dr. Duke, every time you talk about even this current government, people point finger and say, how about the other one? Talk to me about incompetence. You've seen a couple of government from President Sawyer till now. What's your thought on competence in government? Is it more now than ever before or about the same?
No, I think that in every government, like in every human, working group, you will see incompetent people. The problem is not to have incompetent people. The issue is, as a leader, do you weed them out? Do you see them and say, okay, although this person is qualified, I don't think you can do this job. And we have seen that, Amos Sawyer government was different because that was a makeup, a government. You had to accept everybody for peace. So it was not really a government where you had your will, and then people were dismissed because of, some faction didn't like them. But we saw that in a Salif government, She brought a lot of people who she thought were very competent, who had been in the former government and worked with her, all of that. She brought them back. They were competent, they had international experience and everything else, but they couldn't manage it. And she was able to remove some of them. She kept some, but she did remove some people who came with, a lot of knowledge and experience from abroad, working for the UN, the UN this and that on that program and that program. And they came and they couldn't perform because the fact that they were good in 1980 didn't mean they were still good in 2005 or 6. They had a worldview that did not correspond to what Liberia was at the time and what Liberia needed. So she was able to weed out some people. She changed people from the beginning. Maybe to go with what Mr. Nagbe said, we have the same government with Mr. Ri. I think the only person that I know notably that has been removed was Tape without a crisis. I mean, moved from, EPA, NBA guy to go do MP. But definitely that's a problem. The problem is not that you will have incompetent people because political party system, people who make a lot of noise, you may say, okay, that person speaks well. But when you put them to a job, then you know they're not good. You have to have the courage to say, hey, you know what? You can't do this. That's when your leadership comes in. So competence in the state, in the public service depends so much on the leader himself or the leader herself that, the issue is how can you weed them out of your administration?
Thank you. Let me go to call. Call where you work in the Salif government. Did you work with some incompetent people?
Yes, would you like me to name them? I'm just kidding. So can I actually go back a little bit? So Article 56A of the 1986 Constitution is what addresses this idea of working at the pleasure of the president. It doesn't actually say will and pleasure, it says pleasure. It reads all cabinet ministers, deputy and assistant cabinet ministers, ambassadors, ministers, and councils, superintendents of counties, and other government officials, both military and civilian, appointed by the president pursuant this Constitution shall hold their office at the pleasure of the president. And this specifically addresses removal. So it means that it gives the president the power to remove you. There's nothing in it. So this is what the context of it is not that, oh, the president like you so he can put you anywhere and circumvent the Constitution. That's not what that means. It means that the president, if they're not satisfied with your functions, they can just remove you. They don't have to go through all kinds of red tape. They don't have to go back to the Senate and say, I know you confirmed this guy, but I really want to move him. He's being insubordinate. The president could just say, you know what, get up from here, go sit down. You're doing these things outside of our political policy, or whatever the case might be. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that this phrase we use, will and pleasure is not actually constitutional. I wanted to clarify what the context is. It really only addresses removal. And then the question you asked, yes. And I love what Mr. Dukley said, because it illustrates qualifications versus competence. To be competent in an environment like Liberia, even if you're very qualified, you have to be very street smart as well. And this is not something you can learn at school. This is not something you're going to learn at Georgetown University or Brown University. I didn't learn street smarts from the University of Minnesota. But if you are coming to Liberia and you're going to work, let me give you an example, at the Ministry of Transport, as Deputy Minister of Land and Rail, which is a position I was nominated to and confirmed to twice. The first time, I literally ran away. The first time I was appointed, confirmed, I spent a month there. I went to the president and I said, I'm sorry, I cannot do that job. 2 years later, to the month, February of 2014, she sent me back right before the Ebola crisis. Didn't give me a choice, didn't ask me, said, you know what, go back there. I didn't think, the reason I ran away is, even though I'm a policy person, there was so much chaos and so much danger, literal danger involved because of all of the dirty deals that were going on. I didn't think I had the kind of competence needed to do that job effectively. It wasn't running a bus company like NTA. You're dealing with police doing the wrong thing. The Liberia National Police was running an underground motor vehicle registration and driver's license like a cartel. You had all kinds of very awful things that were going on. And so when I went back the second time, I had to tighten my belt. And here's where the street smarts come in. You cannot expect any transportation expert to go in that environment and not step on toes and not have their life threatened and not be in a position where at any moment someone could just go into their house and take them out for stepping on people's eating, stepping on people's livelihood, their illegal livelihood. There's a lot of organized crime involved in the transportation sector, which involves some very powerful people, law enforcement and elected officials. And Liberians know this. So sending a young woman in her 30s into that role, I had to put on, you know, my fearless hat. And there were things that we had to change. For example, I'll give you two quick examples. And this is where we get into this issue of sometimes people could potentially be competent, but they choose to not do things competently because doing things incorrectly is lucrative. We had a situation where someone tipped me off that the police, they said, look, if you want to get evidence of this underground motor vehicle registration scheme that's going on, go to Cotton Tree or Salalab's checkpoint anytime, just show up and just ask people to present the motor vehicle registration documents. So Joe Roberts, who's the current Assistant Minister of Transport, myself, and some other, Darius Alon's brother, I forgot what his first name is, various inspectors from Transport Ministry, Saturday morning at about 6 a.m., we all got together and went to the checkpoint at Cotton Tree. We confiscated every single, so went to the checkpoint, all the cars had to stop at the checkpoint. This is in 2014, as Ebola was going on anyway, so everybody had to get down, wash their hands with bleach water, and we asked everybody to present the motor vehicle documents. Every single document we confiscated at that checkpoint was illegal. Every single document was illegal. Every driver's license was illegal. The officials at the checkpoint started making calls all up the chain, calling the bosses, oh, they get here, she's doing this, she's doing that, she's causing trouble. And by the time they started pressuring their guys at the place, I'm a deputy minister, mind you, the police officer now, he's gotten the okay from his higher ups, and I'm not calling names, to then remove me forcibly from the checkpoint, which it is my constitutional mandate. I should be there. I wasn't causing any traffic issues. They were parking their vehicles anyway. I was confirmed by the Senate. This is my ultimate, fiducial responsibility to the country. I had the police come, and the officer literally tried to grab me and physically remove me. And I told him, you don't need to do that. I will leave. I have enough evidence. I knew it was just a matter of time before you either got a call from a lawmaker or your higher ups, and, to ask me to leave. But I have what I need already. And I said, just, take your hands off me. There's no issue. And I know it's not you, it's somebody telling you to do this, because you were very polite when I got here to the checkpoint. I got in the vehicle, we left. And when we're leaving, Joe Roberts looked at me, he said, you brave-o. I said, I'm not brave. It's my responsibility. It's not about being brave. It's about doing what you've been appointed to do, what the Senate has confirmed you to do, and doing it without fear. I'm not going to get into some of the things I had to go through after that, but I did put through a thorough report, and there were a lot of consequences. A lot of people got in a lot of trouble and were removed. But these are things this is what competence looks like in an environment like that. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. I'm saying that not everyone can function in that kind of environment, no matter how educated they are. that particular skill has absolutely nothing to do with it. That particular skill has everything to do with just having that for me personally, it was just a patriotic duty, and that's another aspect of competence, is understanding what the function of government is, and that you have to straighten things out at all costs.
Dr. Duke,
and sometimes that cost can be your personal safety.
Yeah. Dr. Duke, competence or incompetence and corruption, right? Because there's one thing, listening to call and say, okay, competence, you can be competent and still corrupt, or no. Let's look at corruption. Or is it people are corrupt because they're incompetent, or how does that happen? I've never worked in Liberian government. You did. Tell me.
Well,
Is there a correlation between incompetence and corruption?
I don't think that you can put it two on a balance, because competence is professional and then corruption is a moral issue. So somebody can be competent at a job, like somebody said, you give somebody $1 million to build a bridge, and then they spend $800,000 on the bridge. They keep 200,000. They're corrupt, but they're competent enough to build a bridge. But corruption, so you can be corrupt and competent, but sometime down the line, you may get into your way, and then you may cross the line somewhere. You can blur the line somewhere, and then you get caught into it. But I don't think, competence is professional and corruption is a moral issue. And I wouldn't say mental health issue in some cases.
Mr. Nabwe, let's look at the education ministry, for instance. What would a competent minister of education or a competent high school principal look like?
Well, thank you, Dennis. And before I come to that one, let me thank Ms. Fambule for having the audacity to go back and to the Minister of Transport twice. But I want to commend her and thank her for her service. So that right there, competence, again, like we were saying, competence is not necessarily a formal training. That is what qualifies you. But competence is just that, learning the lay of the land, learning how to navigate, getting the job done efficiently. Now, efficiency is the elimination of waste. When you are efficient, you don't waste time, you don't waste resources, and you get the job done. So Dr. Duke was talking about corruption and efficiency. Yes, the two of them are two very different things. You can be one or the other, or you can be both. But an efficient leader would also, I think, strive to eliminate waste, which most of the time is corruption. Waste, fraud, and abuse. But coming to education, we're talking about how do you measure competence, or how do you measure performance? And one of the things we have in Liberia is the lack of effective monitoring and evaluation of practically every agency of government, down to education. Here you're required to submit weekly lesson plans. And I tell you, the lesson plan is really your roadmap. Even if you forgot yesterday where you left off, right? You can go back to your lesson plan and say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do today. So you're required to submit a lesson plan that will guide you on a daily basis. And you do have a supervisor who is going to monitor your lesson plan. You get evaluated every now and then. So I'm not sure to what extent we do that back home. And then you have the professional development, right? Nobody comes on the job already being an expert. You come with your qualification, but the experience, the training you get on the job is what makes you, a professional, an expert. And the way evaluations are done here, they're not done to trip you up or to make you look bad. No, they tell you, okay, you're very good here. but you could use a little bit of help over here. So we're going to give you several options to pursue to better yourself over here. So no matter how long you teach here, you can never get 100% evaluation. They will always tell you, okay, this is where you're really good at, but there's little room here for improvement. So we don't have that now. I know the president has the We Are Education Fund, which I think is a good thing, but access, granting access to many students to go to school is not equivalent to quality. You're giving the people access to go to the University of Liberia, but where is the support to the institution, to the teachers, to help these people learn properly? Some years ago, I learned, I think 25,000 students took the national exam. I mean, the LU entrance, all 25,000 failed. I don't think it is really on this as much as it is on the performance, delivery of the instruction. Just like computer, garbage in, garbage out. Yes, the students, they're not computers. They have the capacity to analyze, but if you teach them well, the output will also be well. So our educational system, yes, we have a lot of teachers, but I was just reading here, coming in here, UNICEF, 69% of our teachers not, up to par. I don't want to use the word unqualified, but could use help,
Incompetence.
Yes, that is a problem. And it's not the teachers, you have to be given the opportunity to grow professionally. They have to be given the opportunity to grow, Here, you have so much professional development. Every other 2-3 weeks or so, they give the students a half day off. They go home. They start. You stay in there. They bring in professionals, people who have been in the area for years. Some of them have retired. Some are still in the area. They're coming in. They're giving you the best practice, the best way to get this done these days. So that's one. What is the curriculum we have in Liberia? I'm not sure if Tottenham High School and
Goodrich.
Yeah, whether they're teaching the same, same. So you have these children going to the West African Examination Council, and most of them are filling out. Do we have a standard curriculum that we're all teaching to? I'm not sure we do, my friend. So there is a whole lot to be desired. And then the compensation, my experience with working with some schools in Maryland is that I understand the teachers get on government payroll and then they go and actually teach in private schools because what they make on government payroll is not enough, but the government schools don't have the fences to close them. And this is it shocked me. The private schools have the fences. You go in there, they lock you in, you can't come out. So they go to the government school, sign in, but they don't have a way to contain them. And then they leave and go in the private school. That's where they actually teach. And they're on government payroll. Now, if they were compensated well enough, I don't think they will have the need to do that. So, I don't want to be too winded, but it's just too many problems, and they're not very difficult to address. Again, I was telling you about the appropriation in this year's budget. 37% to salaries, 12% to education. And there is a reason why they emphasize primary school, pre-K in the school. So that's where the children learn how to read. That's where they learn emotional intelligence. That's where they learn interpersonal relations. So it is built in them. And this is why they pay them well so that they teach the children, because there is evidence out there. Children who go through these stages are less likely to drop out of college, less likely to be incarcerated. I mean, you name it. So, those are some of the things I can point to that I think are responsible for keeping our education system down.
Dr. Duke, you work in the executive mansion, you work in foreign service, you work at a university. Pick one and tell me how competence look like in those areas that you work. What's your experience?
Well, at LU, we used to call it LU, now they say UF. At LU, back when I was there, I think it was competence. I mean, you didn't come in because somebody sent you or somebody sent a letter of recommendation. You were hired by the dean, and the dean sent you to the vice president for academic affairs, and to go from assistant professor, to go from instructor to assistant professor, to go from assistant professor 1, 2, 3 to get associate professor. You had levels. You had to publish papers. You had to be, on top of your field. You have to take seminars. You have to work to better yourself. But those things are gone now. Though LU is, they call everybody professor. People who call themselves doctor. They don't have a master's, but it's teaching students who are supposed to be doing the masters. People who are senior students are teaching people at first grade level. So that kind of education, I mean, LU, my experience with LU, yes, it was good at the time, but now it's really, really bad because the educational system has gone down the hill. And then I think Madame Sirleaf said it. She said education is a mess. And this is one of the areas where, I mean, if there was any failure in that government, it was really that educational system. And as I was saying, she brought people from outside who were competent. I mean, who were qualified, maybe, but they came and took the educational system without taking into account what has happened before. Where was Liberia in 2005, 2006? It was not the same Liberia in 1980. So you can't come and run the same system. And people who came into the educational system look at it from Monrovia. They didn't look at it from the school level, at the school level. I remember we went to Minnesota with Madame Sirleaf. We were trying to find out from the Minister of Education how many schools we had in Liberia. I mean, high schools, not even school. How many high schools? He didn't know. But then again, yeah, he didn't know. He had no clue. He said, Doc, how you can ask me that? I said, you're a minister. How many? You don't know how many high schools you got in the country? You've been minister for 3 years. He said, well, you know how things are, the priorities. I said, yeah, your priorities are different.
He wanted Katie Mailer to answer the question for you.
Huh?
He wanted Katie Mailer to answer the question for you.
Oh,
well, definitely. But, and the educational system went down, and after him, there was somebody else who was also coming from outside, had been, in the educational system, but not in Liberia, working in the international community. They came back, and then you don't have the same approach. But then you say, okay, who do you have on the ground who is competent? I'm sure there are people who are competent. But if you put...
Like the education minister you're talking about, I don't even think he was qualified, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's political appointment.
Yeah.
So you make these political appointments and you expect the person to do well, and knowing that person is not really qualified to do the job. It doesn't work. So mediocrity becomes part of the culture, and we have that culture. It didn't start with where it started, a long time ago.
Carl, what's your experience with competence and competence? Maybe transport, or what's the other place you work? Land commissioner? Or...
I mean, yeah. So when I worked for the Land Commission, I was actually at UNDP, so that's a different thing. But very competent at the time, because that was a spin-off of the Governance Commission, and most of the people that work for those commissions are extremely capable of doing what they're asked to do. So it's different. Those are not typically, I mean, with the exception of the commissioners, who their role is more, political. The majority of the people at the Land Commission and the Governance Commission at that time were extremely well vetted. And it's good that my first experience working in Liberia was in that environment. So when I was there for a little while, someone called me from here, and who had previously worked during the Judith Bryant administration and ran away. They were supposed to be the ones that try to help to, transition the country to peace. It was too stressful. So how can you manage in that place and all those people? And I said, oh no, these are some of the smartest, most innovative people I've ever worked with. And he said, what? Are you not in Liberia? Because it depends on where you work. It really depends on where you work. If you go to the Liberia Maritime Authority, you've got all these people that are very, very, qualified and capable of doing what it is that they're supposed to do. You know, Mamalu Lynch and all these guys and people who are Mamalu Lynch was piloting ships. You know, he was a ship captain, sailing massive ships across the Atlantic Ocean and coming back and serving at maritime. You had people who have gone to the World Maritime University and gotten specific degrees. So I've worked at places where people were extremely bright and capable. You've got Grace Bay offshore marine engineers. I mean, we've got all kinds of people in Liberia that are brilliant, capable, and also courageous. The issue is when people come in, and you mean Malba Yogba, Malba is running a nightclub when he's one of the few trained people, you know, trained by government to do something, but because he didn't vote for the WIA, he's now running a nightclub. I mean, it's just crazy. Some of the ways that we sideline very, very qualified and competent people, very competent and patriotic citizens. I've met many of them in Liberia. Even in the Liberia National Police, I know I said some really strong things, which are very true, and I would say them anywhere and repeat them anywhere. But we also have some very competent people in Liberia National Police at the police academy, people who have been trained and have studied, and beyond their ability to police, they are also patriotic and honest, decent people. So I don't want people to think that when we talk about competence and incompetence, that we lack competence in Liberia, and even in the country and in the diaspora. And I think it's our patriotic duty to serve our country at least once in some capacity, either volunteering. You don't have to work for government, but if you do, great. I don't want to work for government ever again. It is a very difficult thing. If you go there to do things correctly, it will take a lot out of you. It is not something to do for a long time. It's not something to make for me anyways, you know. So, but I'm glad I did it. I didn't just give, I also took a lot, meaning I learned a lot. I was able to have experiences that have helped my career afterward as well. So the serving your country with sincerity is something that is a responsibility of citizens. And if other people would step up and want to serve in government, they do need to understand that a lot of the process is trying to rebuild things from scratch. Even now, a lot of that was done during the Sirleaf administration. You saw Mary Bro revamp the Passport Bureau. Those new systems that are implemented need to be maintained. We rewrote motor vehicle policy. A lot of it isn't being implemented. It needs to be implemented. There's a lot of things that we served and did. And there's a lot of people there that are extremely competent. They just need to be utilized. You need to take the people who are already capable and let them do what they're able to do to move the country forward. Removing capable people, especially those civil servants who are not political, those technocrats, and sidelining them for political reasons is hurting the country. It's hurting the country. Hopefully some of that gets corrected, you know, after the election. Whether WIA wins a second term or not, I hope a lot of that gets corrected. If WIA wins, he should go look at the people that he sidelined and bring them back. If someone else wins, they should also look at the people George WIA sidelined and bring them back. That being said, there's other ways that citizens can be competent and serve their country competently, and that is by informing yourself and educating yourself and sharing information with your fellow citizens.
Thank
yeah.
Thank you.
Can I say something? I didn't finish. I was talking, you know, you asked me three politics.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had asked me.
Not you. I was
okay.
Well, let me announce that you are watching Top Talking Thursday. Our topic today is competence in public service and why it is important. If you want to join the conversation, the number is 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Dr. Duke, and I want also, while you are talking that, also add competence and patriotism. If you are competent and you are unpatriotic, or as somebody said during the 2011 election, you don't have the country at heart, what happens?
Well, if you don't have the country, I was going to add my diplomatic experience. I think one of the groups that I really think are patriotic and competent are Liberian diplomats who work in foreign service outside of the country. I mean, you can never imagine what they go through. I work here at the embassy in DC, and I was in Abidjan for like 6 months as chargé d'affaires. You can never imagine what they go through to keep Liberian flag flying and doing everything to stay out of trouble. It's in Washington, Paris, you go everywhere, and they don't get paid. You'll never imagine how much they get paid. 99% of them have to do something different to live. That's called, being competent and patriotic. They don't just run away. They don't pack up and run away. In the government, that's, as I say, it's always politics. Who likes you? The president likes you someplace, they put you there. If the president is courageous enough to say, hey, my man, you can't do this job, then they will remove you. If they're not, or the president doesn't know, is not competent to know what to expect from you, then they keep you in that job. Because you don't know what you're doing. The president who appointed you doesn't know what to expect from you because he doesn't know the job himself. He has no understanding of the job. So yeah, incompetent, working the incompetent, running an incompetent system, then you get the system of mediocrity.
Mr. Nabu, is incompetence unpatriotic?
No, I don't really. Honestly, it helps to be patriotic. I think it helps. But you can be patriotic and you can be incompetent. I don't think you need to be patriotic to be competent. Competence, as we're saying, is to do the job and do it efficiently, right? I don't think patriotism is required for that. But it helps if you're patriotic. What is important is if our leader is patriotic, because for him, his job is to assign people to functions that would deliver. If the president is not patriotic, then it makes it difficult. But as a technocrat, I don't believe you necessarily have to be patriotic to be competent. You can be very, very competent and be unpatriotic, and yet you can get a job done.
I have a question. You're saying in public service, like you're saying if you're not patriotic in government, even if you're a technocrat in government, you don't have to be patriotic?
Well, for me, I'm looking at getting the job done. If you are employed,
I understand what you're saying.
Yes,
okay.
If you know what you're doing and you know you are efficient at it, it helps to be patriotic. But I don't think you necessarily have to be patriotic to be competent. I don't think so.
That's not true. That you have to be patriotic to be competent, but if you are competent, you are not patriotic. What are you doing there?
So here's the thing. I just want to clarify. So in America, in the United States, you don't make much money in the public sector. So it does draw patriotic people because if you have a degree in astrophysics, for example, right? That could be used in the public sector. You'll make a lot more money than working for for the government. So most of the people who work at government, who are technical people, who are scientists, they're doing that out of a sense of duty to their country. They're really not compensated well for what they do. So, in Liberia, unfortunately, that's the only place that can hire people. So I understand what you mean. You are correct. And I'm just thinking in the American context, but you're right, especially in the Liberian context. Because you'll just go there because the paycheck is good, but you'll still do your work. Yeah, it makes sense.
Dr. Duke, you were saying something?
I was going to say that, incompetence and patriotism, again, you can be very competent running an institution, but say, okay, I'm not into politics. I don't get into nationalistic sentiment or anything. And does that mean you are not patriotic if you decide to serve your country? That's a form of patriotism if you decide to go and say, okay, I know I can do this. I'm going home. I'm going to get paid less. fight with the mosquitoes, and then I'm going to take the job for 2-3 years, and then you do it competently. Even if you don't have to say you're patriotic.
Right.
Doing that is patriotism.
Yeah.
So I know you're about to go to the colors, and the other thing too is, you know, the reason why we people are called leaders, right? The leader is to lead, right? Because not all of us can find our way. So you, as a leader, you help us to lead, and you know, um, even here in the United States, if you can do the job like Dr. Duplin and Ms. Family are saying, it doesn't matter whether you belong to the party, the party in power at the
Yeah.
time. I mean, we've seen it here. Obama took over. Who did he have at Sector of Defense? Bob Gates. Bob Gates is a Republican to the core. Chuck Hagel. You know, these were all Republicans, but they could do the job that was required at the time. Remember when Obama came in, Osama bin Laden was all over the place, and these people they had again the demonstrated track record competence to address the questions at the time. Of course. So when the focus shifted a little bit, some of them, they took their exit because now the government had decided to shift focus. Now they wanted, more policy, foreign policy, and all of that. So this is why government, very, very few people stay in government for such a long time because you always need that fresh set of eyes, fresh ideas. Because all of us, nobody has all the answers. And this is why, I agree. Some of the people come in government because of their experience and they want to give back. That is patriotism. I agree. That is patriotism. You come in, you just want to help because this country helped you be what you are. So you want to give back. But
Thank
again,
you.
competence and patriotism, I think they're just two very different things. Though the two can work hand in hand, but they're not dependent. They're very mutually exclusive.
That's true.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Addie Tyler from Pennsylvania, and you're watching Focus on Liberia.
All right. It's time to hear from our callers now. Let's go to the phone line. And if you have not already dialed in, please dial in the number on the screen. Let's take the first caller here. That's Mr. Elvis Morris. Elvis, you're live. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jai, and hello to the panelists. One of the things that I wanted to touch on is one of the things that Ms. Fumbler said, and that is she can't stay in government for too long because it takes a lot out of her. But a lot of people who work there who are professionals, they don't have the luxury to come back to the United States to work in the private sector or to work in the States. So for them, that job is the only option they have to feed their families, And being that we don't have a strong private sector, government job, is the best job most people can get in the country. So I think for most people who are competent, sometimes they dabble into corruption because, that's the order of the day, and they lose them, they lose their integrity and they become corrupt. So with this government, you have a lot of people who are both incompetent and corrupt. And certainly you have some people who are competent, but they're not the ones that holding the top position, because those who are in the top positions, like Minister of Finance, former Minister of Presidential Affairs, like she said about, I think, Mobile Yopa, once you leave government, most people, their whole livelihood goes down. I mean, it goes down to almost nothing. So when you're there, you got to maximize it so that when you get out, you can have a good life. So corruption in our country, it will permeate because it will continue because of our poor private sector. You see, the United States people can be corrupt. They will do things for, private law firm and other things like that. So once they leave government, they're going to get a fat job at that law firm. They won't take bribe now, but it's like a pro quo, it's like something they'll do now. For now, they will do something for that company, and then later on, when they leave office or they leave their representative post or whatever, they'll go work for a private equity firm or something like that. Well, since we don't have a private, a strong private sector, a lot of people can't do that. So they got to get what they can get from government, and then when they leave, they'll be fine. I'll leave it there. I think it's a good show, but I think corruption and incompetence in our country is going to be there for a long time until we build up a strong private sector.
But you think corruption is a result of incompetence or no?
Not necessarily. You know, a lot of competent people were corrupt. You see it with the Ellen Johnson government. A lot of the smartest people, the most educated people who were competent, so to say, could do the job.
I disagree. I think if you're corrupt, you're incompetent.
And they came back to the United States. So some of the most, corrupt people, the smartest, the most sophisticated, really corrupt people, are some of the most competent people.
Right, and competence, but thank you. Competence here is not just one thing, right? It encompasses a whole lot. So I don't think you can be competent and you are undermined in the very office.
If you're corrupt, you're not. If you're corrupt, you're not competent. You can be qualified, but if you're corrupt, you're incompetent because you're not doing your job competently. So corruption disqualifies you from being a competent at your job. You're not doing it right. So I think what Elvis meant is that there's a lot of qualified people, but they're corrupt, therefore they're incompetent. And I wanted to also tell Elvis really quickly, Elvis, I was not a public servant. I was a civil servant. I'm sorry. I was a public servant, but I wasn't a civil servant. I was a political appointee. So that is why I said, but the people who are career civil servants, that's not what I was talking about when I said, I couldn't do this again, or it was a short-term thing. Political appointees, you're supposed to serve and go about your business. Serve your country, go about your business. It should not be a career to be a political appointee. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock, you watch the Literary Hour, Beyond Buffoonery, Exploring Ways to Get Liberia Well Rooted in All Things Diligent and Dignified by K. Moses Nawe. That's the book that we're going to be dealing with tomorrow at 6 p.m. on the Literary Hour. Beyond Buffoonery by K. Moses Nawe. Also at 8 o'clock, FOL Friday Night Debate will be here. We're going to talk about the MOU that the government signed with Blue Mountain or the UAE, they said. We're going to talk about that. They said it's not true. We also, Unity Party Standard Bearer Joseph Newman Boakai in court. Phase 1 of the BVR is complete. How did it do? And the Liberty Party's case at the Supreme Court, is it all settled? Join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. for Friday Night Debate right here on Focus on Liberia. And I must state that Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia, is the best since 1847. And you can take that to the bank. Well, every Thursday we do our Tabata session. Tabata is a word from the crude speaking group that means foolishness, nonsense. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, prepare your Tabata. Oh, I also wanted to read a few comments here because there were some comments here that were some questions here that were asked. Okay. Dave said most of the people there, they were competent, but they were unpatriotic. Why did Mary Brown succeed more than most of the Salif officials? Because I think he believed Mary Brown is patriotic.
Is she still patriotic, serving under Weah?
Most of the people there are not competent. You never headed a major company, but you are heading a ministry of a country of 4 million people.
I never had it. Is she talking about me? I think that's very funny because
no, not you.
I think she is.
She said
because I think she is. I never headed the Ministry of Transport. I headed Land and Rail Transport, and I wrote public policy for Land and Rail Transport, and I was very qualified for that role.
Right, and that's why I don't think she's talking to you because you are not heading a ministry. She's giving a general statement here that people who never headed anything now heading a ministry. Sam Wallace said the will and pleasure clause exists in many countries. And we clarified that, that is just pleasure, not will.
And more importantly, it has to do with removal than anything else. So y'all don't try to pleasure the president.
JG2, competence is not a constitutional requirement but professional criteria to ensure tasks and responsibilities are effectively and efficiently done with minimal or no supervision. I don't think I agree all that much that a competence is not a constitutional requirement. I think it is. So what do you think? Because the Constitution sometimes spell out the function that you're supposed to be performing.
Yeah.
Right. So if you go by the function, if your function is to levy taxes, and so what tells me that you should know something about that, right? At least your basic reading
Yeah.
skills should be there.
Yeah,
So that's
I
how
think
I'm
most
understanding
of
that.
those jobs have the functions prescribed by law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That this is what we expect you to do, and then you must be competent at it. I think that's
All right. So we'll take a short break. When we come back, prepare your Tabata of the week and tell us if there's any Tabata that you want to talk about. We'll take this short break and we'll be right back. Hello and welcome to Focus on Liberia. For education, information, culture, entertainment, and overall wide variety of programs, tune in to Focus on Liberia, the best in Liberian diaspora television. We are focused on Liberia, from Patawi Falls to the Blue Lake of Bombay, from the Bella Forest in Bapulu to the Atlantic coastline in Buchanan, from Lake Piso in Cape Mount to the Putu and Tiempo mountain ranges of Ground Jide, from River Nowo in Grand Cru County to Foya in Lofa, from the Firestone rubber plantation in Habel to the Port of Harper in Maryland, from Providence Island in Monrovia to Sacre-Pied in Nimba, from Sister City in Riverside to the Kilipo Range in River G, from the Gola Forest in northwest Liberia to the valleys of Jiripo in Sino County. We are focused on Liberia with the strong conviction to educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia, our glorious land of liberty. Welcome back to
That was
Talk
nice, Dennis.
Talking
Good job.
Thursday. Yeah. All right. So we start with your Tabata of the week. Let me start with my viewers here. We have some sharing their Tabata already. Carl, let me start with you. I don't have a Tabata here.
There's
Carl,
no
what's your Tabata
Tabata
of the
for the
week?
viewers. My Tabata is it's not even related to Liberia. It's this young man who was shot for ringing a doorbell in a community, in a very racist Confederate flag waving community. My Tabata is twofold. It's in the first place, this crazed, evil old man shooting someone's child, trying to kill someone's child. But my second part of that Tabata is African immigrants coming to the United States not knowing what this country really is and putting their children in harm's way. It happens a lot more than we discuss. I'm not blaming his mother or his father for what happened, but I, having been raised in this country, would never send my son to knock on doors or look for anyone in that community. Nor would I send my younger children to go to someone's house in that community. We have to protect our kids. So my Tabata is this young man who was shot and the failure on so many levels to protect his safety.
Thank you. Dr. Duke.
My Tabata will go on the other side of the continent. The stupidity that is going on in Sudan, getting people killed because two generals are being supported by foreign powers to fight for power that they could not control. That's a stupidity. That's my Tabata. Sudan.
Mr. Namwe.
Yes, my Tabata would be this nonsense that's going on in the opposition community in Liberia. I mean, it just boggles my mind. Um, I don't know, Dennis. I don't think there can be any disagreement that is greater than Liberia. they've had their disagreements, but if they don't come together, I think they will regret more than whatever it was that separated. So that's my type of thing. The inability to compromise and come together. I think it's a failure of leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sam Wallow got is Tabata here. Sam Wallow said the Tabata of the week is VP Bwaka being taken to court by a complainant alleging that VP Bwaka acted improperly in a 1994 land deal. For Sam, that's complete Tabata. Talking Tabata now. Elvis Morris, my Tabata is the opposition claiming that the election will be rigged simply based on voter registration, arguing against the process in court. Yet, Cummings and Bwaka participating by registration or by registering. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. To me, that's my Tabata of the day. ING by itself. To me, that's Tabata.
That's Tabata, Elvis. ING.
ING.
Thank you all for the night. At this time, we're going to go around the room now and conclude on our discussion, competence in public service and why it is important. Let me start with Carl. We'll go to Dr. Duke. And the first person, and Victor will have the last word. Carl, your conclusion.
My conclusion is nobody's going to save Liberia. The competence, the skill, the talent, the patriotism, the love for country, or whatever it's going to take to lift Liberia out of its current state and elevate it to where it was intended to be, by the founders, by all of our ancestors who have suffered for us to be here today and still be able to wave a sovereign flag over our heads. The solutions to our problems lie within us, within our human capital. We have to understand that. We have to invest in our human beings. Nothing else, no one else will resolve these issues but us. And I'm looking mostly at the children. We have to put in them, instill in them the courage and the skills that they need and the confidence, the self-esteem they need to elevate the country to where it was intended to be.
Thank you. Dr. Duke.
Yes, you want to elevate the country, so you have to put competent people, qualified people, so that they can show you how competent they can be in their jobs. And that demands leadership. It demands that people also take responsibility, ownership of the process. Our system is so politicized that sometimes we don't see the real good people. We have a small political class, a small, again, a small professional class in Liberia. So if you don't belong to a political class, you'll be left out. And a lot of talent is being wasted. A lot of talent in Liberia that are being wasted. Qualified people who have not been given a chance to perform at a level, and that is something that we need to work on. It's not just we have a lot of educated people. You've got people in the diaspora who are ready to go work, who are ready, but then you have to have that leadership that understand that you can open the space and then you create space for everyone, and you allow qualified people to stand up and to do the job they can do, the best they can do, and that's how you will elevate that country out of where it is.
Thank you. Victor, you got the last word.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Dr. Dukley and Ms. Family. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you also to our audience out there. Yeah, I really believe competence is a must for technocrats in government. They run the day-to-day functions of government, and patriotism is also a must for our leaders. If you have a competent technocrats technocratic group of people running the government. Then the patriotic leader will make sure to match competence with whatever openings that are available. But this whole concept of, you know, taking, I don't want to talk about the airport because my sister has already talked about it, you know, but this whole thing of, friendship and nepotism and favoritism, taking someone who is obviously not competent. People have different levels of competence, different levels of training. We can't all do all. you know you must take the person and put them in the capacity where they'll give out a maximum output. I think a leader has a responsibility to make sure that happens. Then we, the technocrats, we have to make sure that we're also matching our skills with the requirement. I think it's within your purview to say no, thank you. She did it. She went to the president and said, "Okay, I really love my country. I came to serve, but no thanks. I just can't make it." And she walked away. I think we can say that. Of course, she did come back and then made things better. So I think the two of them really, we can marry the two competent technocrats being directed by patriotic leaders. I think they'll take us where we need to get.
On that note, I want to thank you very much for joining us on this Thursday evening, Thursday night to do Tough Talking Thursday. I want to thank our viewers for being here, always contributing, calling, and even those who will watch later. Always set your dial at Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We're going to end this broadcast as we do on every broadcast with the song that says we are all Liberians. We agree, the incompetent, the competent, the qualified, barely qualified, we are all Liberians. And we have a place. Jackie will always say, Liberia is the house and we are the pillars, right? Holding this country up. So no matter what your qualification can be, there is a place that you can work very well. And so we are all Liberians. What we all need to remember is to do our very best to make Liberia the greatest and the glorious land of liberty. Have a good night and God bless you. We are all
Thank you very
Liberians.
much. Good night.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home.